The 2007 Formula One season will forever be remembered as one of the greatest F1 seasons of all time, with the rise of Lewis Hamilton, the inter-team feud at McLaren, and one of the closest championship battles in F1 history. However, one of the more controversial parts of the season was Spygate, the name given to the industrial espionage performed by McLaren personnel to develop the MP422. This eventually led to McLaren being disqualified from the Constructors' Championship and having to pay a $100 million fine. Some at the time were expecting a harsher penalty, similar to what happened to Toyota's World Rally team, where after being found guilty of cheating in 1995, they were disqualified from both championships and were banned from entering the 1996 season as well as the remainder of the current season. But what if this was the penalty that McLaren had received? And how would it have affected F1 in the late 2000s? Well, let's look at an alternative. September 2007. On the Thursday before the Belgian Grand Prix, it is now announced by the FIA that McLaren have been disqualified from both the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships, and are barred from participating from the remainder of the 2007 season, as well as the entire 2008 season. This would all but end the championship battle in 2007, and the British team would have no other choice other than to leave Belgium and head home one last time. In reality, I have no idea what would happen to the personnel at McLaren and Mercedes if this actually happened, but I'm going to go the optimistic route and say that the team will last long enough to be on the grid in 2009. The Toyota World Rally team was able to survive their ban, and even retained plenty of their old sponsors on their return, so I don't see why McLaren couldn't do the same thing. So what happens now at the final 4 races of the 2007 season? I imagine the Belgian Grand Prix goes the same way, with Kimi Räikkönen leading Ferrari to a 1-2 finish. The Japanese Grand Prix is the most affected of these races. Without Fernando Alonso's crash, there is no safety car that leads to Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel colliding behind the safety car. And without Lewis Hamilton, Mark Webber would be leading and would probably go on to take his first victory, as long as he can stay ahead of future teammate Sebastian Vettel, who would probably finish second. The Chinese Grand Prix would see Kimi take another race victory as well as the World Championship, with Felipe Massa helping Ferrari take another one too, and Sebastian Vettel would take a second straight podium in the Toro Rosso. Finally, in Brazil, I think Ferrari wouldn't compromise Felipe Massa's strategy to get Kimi ahead of him, since the championship has already been decided, allowing the Brazilian to win his home race, with a third Ferrari 1-2 in 4 races. This would overall be a much more boring, Ferrari-dominated end to the season, with the only other major beneficiaries being Mark Webber, who would get his first win, and Sebastian Vettel, who would achieve 2 podiums in his rookie season. Moving on to 2008 now. And we need to decide where McLaren's drivers would go for the 2008 season. Alonso still returns to Renault, but what happens to Lewis Hamilton? Based on my research, it seems that when Alonso was looking for a new team for 2008, his alternative to Renault was Red Bull. Rumors suggested that he would replace David Coulthard, while the Scotsman would be demoted to Toro Rosso alongside Sebastian Vettel for his final season. I think something similar to this would happen if McLaren got banned, but with Hamilton replacing Coulthard instead of Alonso. Then with Heikki Kovalainen, I imagine that the Finn would probably end up at Toyota, since he was rumored to replace Jarno Trulli if he didn't get the McLaren seat anyway. So with the 2008 grid set, how does the season go? Originally I was just going to skim over the championship battle and say that Felipe Massa would be the champion, but then I started thinking about BMW Sauber. Robert Kubica was leading the World Championship after the Canadian Grand Prix. However, BMW only wanted a race win in 2008, and immediately stopped developing their 2008 car after winning this race. But without McLaren, Nick Heidfeld would probably win the opening race of the season in Australia, which could lead to one of 2 outcomes. Either BMW stopped developing their 2008 car after round 1 of the season, or, what I think is more likely, BMW realized that they have a great chance of winning both championships in 2008, and develop the car throughout the 2008 season at the expense of their 2009 car. Robert Kubica wasn't that far behind Felipe Massa in the final points standings anyway, so I honestly could see Robert Kubica winning the 2008 championship if BMW continued to develop their 2008 car until the end of the season like Ferrari. I imagine that we would get a great championship battle between these two, but it would be too close to call for me to say which one would be the champion in this timeline. In the case of Lewis Hamilton, he would probably beat teammate Mark Webber and still have some great performances, such as at Silverstone, where I honestly think he would have still won the race, despite the RB4 being a midfield car. However, Red Bull stopped developing their car early on in 2008 to focus on the RB5, so I doubt Hamilton would be able to get any other great results in 2008. There are other potential domino effects of a McLaren ban in 2008. For example, at the 2008 German Grand Prix, Renault driver Nelson Piquet Jr. finished second behind Lewis Hamilton. However, if McLaren had been banned, then this could lead to the Brazilian taking his one and only race win in F1. Which genuinely could stop Crashgate from ever happening, since Renault only did that because they hadn't had a win yet. This could have many unintended consequences, such as Flavio Briatore not being banned from F1 after 2009. Another example is at the 2008 Hungarian Grand Prix, where the Toyota of Timo Glock finished second behind Lewis Hamilton, but like before, this could easily become Glock and Toyota's first race win. Multiple Toyota personnel have stated that, if the Japanese team had achieved at least one victory in F1, they wouldn't have left. So could this McLaren ban have led to Toyota remaining in F1 after 2009? I won't go into these two topics right now because I have plans on making these into videos at some point. But it just shows how much different things could have been in this scenario. Moving on to the 2009 season now, where we would have seen the return of McLaren to F1. I imagine that Lewis Hamilton would rejoin them as well after a single season with Red Bull. Obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, it's easy to say that Lewis should have stayed at Red Bull in this scenario, but no one in 2008 would have believed you if you said that Red Bull would dominate the early 2010s. Most people saw them as comic relief. And fans and journalists alike were even questioning whether Adrian Newey still could design a championship-winning car. But back to McLaren now, who would drive the second McLaren? I think Heikki Kovalainen would remain at Toyota for 2009, and after a season out of F1 during a recession, I wouldn't be surprised if McLaren would want a second driver who could bring money with them to the team. It's difficult to predict who McLaren could have hired in this scenario, but personally, I would pick Bruno Senna to be their second driver. The Brazilian finished second in the 2008 GP2 series and was in negotiations for a 2009 race seat with Brawn and Toro Rosso. Bruno would be able to bring his personal sponsors to the team, and I imagine having the Senna name back at McLaren would be great for marketing. How well McLaren would do in this scenario is difficult to predict and depends on how much resources they would have been able to invest in their 2009 car while they were banned. Personally, I think that McLaren would spend the entirety of 2008 developing their 2009 car, similar to how Honda and Red Bull sacrificed their 2008 seasons to pour as many resources into their 2009 cars as possible. But since McLaren wouldn't be racing in 2008, they could put 100% of their efforts into their 2009 car. Because of this, I actually think that McLaren could have the best car in 2009, leading to Lewis Hamilton becoming the 2009 world champion instead of Jenson Button. Honestly, I think this could also lead to McLaren having a better car in 2010 as well, and given how close that season was, I think that it is possible that Lewis Hamilton would win a second world championship in 2010. 2011 would probably be the same as it was in reality, with Red Bull dominating and McLaren screwing up the development of the MP426. Then from 2012 onwards, I imagine that things would be the same as they were in reality, with Vettel winning the following two seasons, and Mercedes dominating from 2014 onwards. So in conclusion, if McLaren received a harsher penalty, the 2007 season would be ruined, with a three-way fight for the championship, turning into an easy victory for the Scuderia. The 2008 season would now see Felipe Massa battling Robert Kubica, and despite a harsher penalty, McLaren could end up winning a world championship anyway in 2009, and maybe even another one in 2010. Part of me even wonders if this later success could lead to Hamilton remaining at McLaren after the 2012 season. I guess it shows just how different F1 could look just by removing one of the top teams on the grid.